Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
In mid-June 2015, one of the most sickening and controversial cases in American criminal history came to light. Claudinia D.D. Blanchard, a 48-year-old woman, had been stabbed to death in her own home. At the same time, her daughter, a young disabled woman identified as Gypsy Rose Blanchard, had disappeared, apparently the victim of a kidnapping. Both Claudine and Gypsy were local celebrities. The girl suffered from multiple chronic illnesses and needed a wheelchair to get around, in addition to the constant care of her mother. Although they did not have the means to cover all of her medical expenses, nor her basic needs, mother and daughter received state subsidies, gifts, and donations from the community to improve their quality of life. Both lived alone and used to give talks about the girl's delicate state of health and her great courage in facing adversity, which quickly caught the attention of various media outlets, who made their story known, moving the entire nation. The disconcerting outcome of this case, after the brutal murder of Claudine Blanchard, would not only take the American authorities by surprise, but generated enormous interest even at an international level. Springfield is a city in the state of Missouri in the United States. Despite its large population and constant growth, the inhabitants retain certain small-town customs, such as kindness and solidarity between neighbors. This is how they welcomed Claudine Blanchard, also known as DD, a single mother who lived with her disabled daughter, Gypsy Rose Blanchard. Gypsy suffered from muscular dystrophy, epilepsy, asthma, leukemia, and digestive problems, which forced her to be fed through a gastric tube, as well as hearing, vision, and cognitive deficiencies. Claudine seemed to be a loving and selfless mother who dedicated all her time to the care of her daughter, which prevented her from getting a job. They arrived in Springfield in May 2008 when the nonprofit organization Habitat for Humanity built and gifted them a distinctive pink house adapted to Gypsy's special needs. After their previous home in New Orleans was destroyed by Hurricane Katrina on August 28, 2005. Both were extremely grateful for the constant support of the community and authorities. Several media outlets spread the emotional story, and from then on, everyone in Springfield recognized them, describing them as charming, cheerful, and friendly people. However, on Sunday, June 14, 2015, after being aware of their well-being for years, some citizens warned the local police that something strange was happening in the home of Claudine and Gypsy Blanchard. At around 2:30 p.m., a post made on the Facebook profile shared by the mother and daughter caught their attention. It was a comment that said, "That bitch is dead." This was a message that was aggressive and unusual enough to worry friends and acquaintances. Some of the neighbors who had direct contact with the women tried to contact them by phone, but they did not get a response. At first, they thought that the Facebook account had been hacked, but 45 minutes later, a new post on the wall again worried them. It read, "I slashed that fat pig and raped her sweet innocent daughter. Her scream was so loud, LOL." A couple of curious people approached the Blanchards' house, but the door was closed and nothing could be seen through the windows, as they were covered with filters and curtains, which Claudine used to maintain her privacy. Finally, the neighbors decided to notify the police. The county sheriff and a group of agents arrived at the scene a few minutes later. Claudine's vehicle was in the parking lot, and they assumed that both were at home. They knocked on the door repeatedly, but no one answered, so they were forced to request a search of the house to bring calm to the neighborhood. At around 10:45 p.m., police obtained permission and entered the Blanchard family home, finding a gruesome scene. Claudine, 48, was lying face down in her own bed, covered in blood. The police report indicated that she had received a total of 17 stab wounds to the back and had been dead for several days. Inside the bathroom, they found 19-year-old Gypsy's wheelchair, but the young woman did not seem to be anywhere. The police's first hypothesis was that Gypsy Blanchard had been kidnapped by her mother's killer. If that was the case, her life was clearly in danger. Dozens of curious people and media gathered outside the house, and the case was covered by the country's main news outlets, especially because Claudine and Gypsy were extremely loved by the community. While investigators searched the crime scene, they were unable to find the murder weapon or any other clue that indicated someone had broken into the home. Neighbors were dismayed. Some said that Claudine and Gypsy were loving, kind people and could not conceive that someone would want to hurt them. However, when investigators spoke to Alea Woodmansey, a friend and neighbor of Gypsy, they got their first clue. According to Alea's testimony, Claudine was extremely overprotective of Gypsy and did not allow her to have friends. In fact, they preferred to communicate secretly through messages on social networks to avoid the mother interfering in the conversation. Gypsy confessed to Alea that she was in a virtual relationship with a young man she met on a Christian dating site. The subject would be identified as Nicholas Godejohn, 26 years old. No evidence really linked him to the attack, but he immediately became the main suspect. Meanwhile, cyber experts managed to track the IP of the computer from which the alarming Facebook post had been made. This evidence revealed the location of a home in Wisconsin, about 965 kilometers from the crime scene. Missouri police contacted Wisconsin authorities to tell them they were looking for a suspect in murder and possible kidnapping. They provided the address they had obtained and quickly went to the residence, where Nicholas Godejohn lived with his mother. 24 hours after the discovery of Claudine Blanchard's body, Waukesha County Police, in collaboration with a SWAT team, surrounded the Godejohn family home. Although the officers were not sure that Gypsy was still alive, they sensed that she could be a prisoner and ordered Nicholas over a loudspeaker to release her and turn himself in. After several uneasy minutes of waiting, the front door finally opened. The first to come out was Gypsy Blanchard, with her hands up, shaking with fear and walking. The officers could not believe what they were seeing. They understood, as did everyone in Springfield, that Gypsy was disabled and could not move her legs. However, Gypsy was standing in front of them. Shortly after, Nicholas Godejohn was released, and both young people were sent to the police station for questioning, although the media reported that fortunately, Gypsy Blanchard was safe and that her mother's alleged killer had been arrested. At first, not too many details were revealed. The same journalists were aware, unofficially, that something extremely strange was happening. The investigators were not only surprised to discover that the girl could walk without problems, but they had gathered enough evidence to prove that she was not a hostage and that she was possibly involved in the murder of her mother. Apparently, Gypsy Blanchard and Nicholas Godejohn were having a love affair via the internet, and they exchanged hundreds of messages daily. The police also had several security camera recordings, which placed them in the previous days making purchases in various Springfield stores, spending a night in a hotel, and buying bus tickets to the city of Big Bend, where they would finally be arrested. When questioned by Lieutenant Stan Hancock, Gypsy initially played dumb, admitted that she had run away from home with her boyfriend, Nicholas, and supposedly believed that this was the reason they had been arrested. However, when they informed her that Claudine was dead, she looked shocked and burst into tears. The news had clearly affected her, and she asked if her mother had taken her own life. But Detective Hancock informed her that she had been the victim of a crime. Although he tried to console her, Hancock was quite insistent and emphatic in asking the young woman to cooperate. Gypsy claimed to be unaware of what had happened to her mother, and that she was not involved in her death. However, Gypsy seemed extremely nervous, and it was obvious that she was hiding something. She finally gave in to the pressure and confessed that she had acted in complicity with her boyfriend, but that at no time did she wield the murder weapon, and that he had killed her. Gypsy told Detective Hancock that her mother did not let her interact with anyone. However, at night she used the computer to access a Christian dating site, where she spoke with different boys. It was on that portal where in 2012 she met Nicholas Godejohn, and they began a virtual relationship, a relationship that they kept secret for more than 2 years. A month before the crime, in March 2015, they met in person for the first time, when Nicholas traveled from Wisconsin to visit her. Gypsy had warned him that her mother was extremely controlling, that they were together all the time, and that she would hardly allow her to have a boyfriend. But the young people had hatched a plan. They pretended to meet in a movie theater, where the movie Cinderella was premiering, and they began to chat amicably, as if they didn't know each other. However, Claudine immediately became suspicious, and under pressure from her mother, Gypsy ended up telling her the truth, and the woman forbade her to have contact with the boy again. This would have been the main reason why Gypsy and Nicholas decided to carry out what they called the Plan B, which consisted of killing Claudine and running away in order to maintain their love relationship. Apparently, the Facebook messages that alerted family and acquaintances were written by Gypsy herself. Although at the moment it was not too clear why she had published them, Detective Hancock was still in shock, because supposedly Claudine and Gypsy Blanchard had an excellent relationship. But the fact that the young woman was not handicapped and did not need a wheelchair to move around suggested that all this could be a simple fraud, to obtain benefits from the state and donations from the community. In fact, it was also possible to prove that Gypsy was not 19 years old, but 23. At the same time, in an adjoining room, Nicholas Gojan admitted to investigators that he had committed the crime, stating that he had done it because he loved Gypsy, and she had asked him to, since his mother would never allow them to be together.
So what I want to know is, can you tell me this first?
Okay.
Did Gypsy know that you were going to kill her mother?
Honestly, she asked me to.
Okay. So Gypsy knew you were going to do it because Gypsy asked you to.
Yes.
Why did she ask you to do that?
Because she felt it was her only way to be with me.
Okay. She felt like if you killed the mom, then that's the only way she could be with you.
Yeah.
Inside Nicholas's home, officers found a knife containing traces of the victim's blood. There was no doubt that he was involved, and although in just a few hours, the police seemed to have solved the case, as they had two confessed murderers, text messages where they planned the crime, and compromising security camera recordings. Hancock sensed that all this was only the tip of the iceberg. On Tuesday, June 16th, one day after the arrest of Gypsy Blanchard and Nicholas Gojan, Greene County Sheriff Jim Arnott faced the media to hold a press conference. To the bewilderment of dozens of journalists, he would make an enigmatic statement. What was about to come to light would shake the entire country and turn this story into one of the most controversial in international true crime.
Specify at the beginning of this press conference that this is an ongoing investigation. And I want to start off with saying things are not always as they appear. Both Facebook postings that appeared, that everyone has copies of, were authored by Gypsy. I want to make a statement to use caution in donating money to this family at this time, as we have unearthed the appearance of a long financial fraud scheme along with this tragic event. We also know that she can walk without assistance or a wheelchair, and she can do that very well. We really don't know the true background of this family.
Gypsy Rose Blanchard was born on July 27, 1991, in Golden Meadow, Louisiana. Her parents, Claudinia Petra and Rod Blanchard, got married when they found out they were going to be parents, after 3 months of dating. However, the young man was not able to face such responsibility, and they separated shortly before the birth of the girl. Claudine, of 24 years old, was a beautiful girl who was even a beauty queen and a nursing assistant student. On the other hand, Rod was barely 17 years old and wasn't sure he had made the right decision. In recent interviews, the man acknowledged that he was afraid of fatherhood, and that at that time, he was an immature and inexperienced boy. He also stated that Claudine intimidated him, as she was extremely controlling, manipulative, and had strange behaviors, such as practicing black magic. Even so, he promised to be a present father and frequently visited his daughter, in addition to paying child support of $1,200 monthly. After the separation, Claudine was forced to live with the girl at her parents' house. It was then that Gypsy's health problems began. When her daughter was 3 months old, Claudine noticed that she stopped breathing while she slept. The doctors diagnosed her with sleep apnea, and recommended the use of a machine that alerted adults if the baby's breathing was interrupted. Until then, Gypsy had not shown any other really serious health problems. However, before she was 1 year old, she developed strabismus in her right eye, and for this reason, she would undergo her first surgery. It is as a result of these two incidents that Claudine developed a pathological need to manipulate her daughter's health for her convenience. She understood that in this way she aroused the sympathy of those around her, in addition to obtaining financial assistance from the state and other charitable organizations. From then on, all the medical complications that Gypsy suffered were induced by her mother, known as Munchausen syndrome by proxy. It is a form of child abuse, where the caregiver, who is usually a mother or father, invents, exaggerates, or in the worst case causes symptoms in their children, intending to call attention and get all kinds of benefits. Throughout her childhood, Gypsy was negligently diagnosed with several diseases. Visits to the hospital became a routine, and Claudine managed to convince the doctors that the girl had health problems, causing her symptoms by taking various medications. She insisted for months that her daughter had serious stomach problems, and at the age of only 3 years she was operated on, and a gastric tube was placed through which she had to be fed. This completely cruel and unnecessary procedure allowed Claudine to exercise total control over Gypsy, since it facilitated the infiltration of all kinds of medications. The situation worsened when the girl started attending school. At that time, her mother claimed that she had hearing problems, asthma, epilepsy, muscular dystrophy, and a developmental delay, for which she had to take a large amount of medication. Without having finished the first year of school, Claudine decided to take her daughter from the establishment because she considered that her health was too fragile, and she did not believe that those in charge were responsible enough to give her medicines. Supposedly, she promised to educate her at home, but that would never happen. Completely isolated, the girl only entertained herself by watching television. Her mother had forbidden her to socialize with other children her age. At the age of 8, Gypsy suffered a minor accident while riding a motorcycle with her grandfather. Despite having only a small wound on one of her legs, Claudine forced her to use an immobilizer and then a wheelchair, which became permanent. Gypsy's father Rod and Claudine's relatives questioned the need for the wheelchair, but thanks to her ability to lie and manipulate people, she used medical terms that she had learned as a nursing assistant and managed to convince them that the girl's muscular dystrophy was becoming more severe, and that one of the seizures caused by epilepsy had left her paralyzed from the waist down. Although Claudine insisted on Gypsy's illnesses, it was not only her family who doubted the veracity of these illnesses, but also some doctors who found nothing out of the ordinary in the girl. When this occurred, the woman simply took her to another hospital. In 1999, mother and daughter moved to New Orleans because Claudine had had several problems with her father, since she was conflictive, did not work, and apparently had stolen the savings of one of her relatives. There were also rumors that years before, Claudine's mother had died under her care, and apparently the woman showed signs of starvation. Shortly afterward, Laura, her stepmother, who had been bedridden for 9 months, began to suspect that Claudine was poisoning her with some kind of herbicide. She reported this to her husband, and the man had no alternative but to throw his daughter out of the house. In the following years, Claudine made sure to keep Gypsy away from all her family surroundings, denying her contact with her father, claiming that the man had no interest in associating with them, that he was a drug addict, and that he did not pay child support, when in fact he did. The constant consumption of unnecessary drugs not only caused the symptoms of the diseases that Claudine claimed her daughter had, but also began to rapidly undermine Gypsy's health. Her body was so emaciated that she managed to convince specialists that the girl suffered from leukemia. Shortly after, Gypsy would be connected to an oxygen tank, with which she had to travel everywhere, despite her daughter's delicate state of health. Claudine seemed to be an extremely positive woman. When she decided that they should cut Gypsy's hair to avoid the side effects of her leukemia treatment, she allowed a couple of nurses to shave her head as well, as a show of unconditional love and support, all to keep up appearances and make her lies more believable. The case of Gypsy Rose Blanchard gradually began to move the community. Claudine herself took it upon herself to make her daughter's condition known by all possible means. Thanks to this, she was able to access various financial aid for her treatments and managed to attract the attention of several charitable institutions. Mother and daughter were constantly invited to events and concerts and received gifts and donations. In 2001, they traveled to Disney World with all expenses paid after the Make-A-Wish Foundation accepted a request supposedly made by Gypsy. The organization, dedicated to fulfilling the dreams of children with serious illnesses, had been deceived, since it was actually her mother who signed the papers. Claudine even managed to get them a vehicle specially adapted to carry a wheelchair and an oxygen tank. Gypsy's popularity allowed her to pose in photographs with various celebrities, such as her favorite actors from the Lord of the Rings film saga. However, on August 28, 2005, Hurricane Katrina devastated much of New Orleans, and the home where Claudine and Gypsy lived was destroyed. Although they spent more than a month in a shelter, they received all kinds of donations and professional help for Gypsy. On September 24, 2007, during a visit to the neurologist Bernardo Flasterstein, Claudine was on the verge of being discovered. The professional performed a couple of tests on Gypsy, who was 16 years old at the time, and noticed that her muscles were in good condition, so he asked her to stand up. Although the girl had spent half her life in a wheelchair and supposedly suffered from muscular dystrophy, she was able to get up without any problems. Claudine was upset, and when the doctor asked for her daughter's medical records, Claudine replied that all her papers had been lost during the hurricane. Dr. Bernardo Flasterstein recorded in the records that the mother was not reliable. After contacting Gypsy's doctors in New Orleans, he learned that her original muscle biopsy had come back negative, undermining Claudine's reported diagnosis of muscular dystrophy, as well as her claim that all her records had been destroyed by flooding. He suspected the possibility of factitious disorder imposed on another. Claudine contrived to gain access to Flasterstein's notes and subsequently stopped taking Gypsy to see him. Flasterstein did not follow up by reporting the case to social services. He said other doctors had told him to treat the pair with golden gloves, as they were well known in the community and doubted the authorities would believe him anyway. In late October 2009, an anonymous caller told the police about Claudine's use of different names and birth dates for herself and her daughter, and suggested Gypsy was in better health than claimed. The officers who performed the resulting wellness check accepted Claudine's explanation that she used the misinformation to make it harder for her abusive ex-husband to find them, without talking to Rod or Gypsy, and reported that Gypsy seemed genuinely disabled. In 2008, Claudine and Gypsy were relocated to Springfield, Missouri, where Habitat for Humanity gave her a house that was completely wheelchair accessible. However, it was at that moment that the relationship between mother and daughter began to crack. Gypsy met Alea Woodmansey, a neighbor with whom she became friends, despite her mother having forbidden her to do so. She was a normal girl who went to school, had a group of friends, and a boyfriend. This immediately caught her attention. Until then, Gypsy had grown up in a fantasy world, completely dominated by her mother. Until that moment, Gypsy never dared to question her mother for forcing her to use a wheelchair, even though she could walk, or for constantly shaving her head. Nor could she understand why she used a gastric tube that she did not need and that only caused her discomfort. Not only was she subjected to painful treatments and surgeries for years, but Claudine prevented her from talking to other people. All she could do was stay at home, watching Disney movies and fantasizing about meeting a Prince Charming who would rescue her from her confinement. Although she dreamed of having an ordinary life, there was a great difficulty. She did not have the necessary tools to support herself economically in the outside world. In addition, the side effects of drug use continued to damage her body irreversibly. She lost several teeth due to taking the medication for supposed epilepsy. She also had to undergo an operation to remove her salivary glands because she would not stop drooling, when in reality, Claudine applied an anesthetic to her gums to produce excess saliva. The first time Gypsy confronted her mother was at the age of 19, when she discovered documents that revealed her true date of birth. Until then, Claudine had led her to believe that she had been born in 1995. When she questioned her, she simply told her that it must be a typo. The truth is that the woman constantly claimed that Gypsy was a minor, possibly to arouse the compassion of those close to her and the interest of certain charitable institutions. In 2011, at the age of 20, Gypsy attended a science fiction convention with her mother. While they were walking around, a man accidentally stumbled upon her wheelchair and they started chatting. A few days after the incident, the man found a Facebook profile that the young woman had created behind her mother's back and sent her a friend request. The two began a virtual relationship that soon led to explicit sexual messages. Gypsy not only felt in love, But she also found someone she could trust for the first time. Gypsy came to confess to him that she could actually walk, and that Claudine forced her to pretend that she was disabled. The subject convinced her that she should become independent and escape from the yoke of her mother. He invited her to his house in Arkansas, and Gypsy accepted, without warning of the danger that this could imply. After this conversation, she took some of her belongings and left her home while Claudine slept. She traveled by taxi for more than 4 hours and traveled more than 300 kilometers until she reached the house of the man with whom she had been exchanging messages on Facebook for months. Gypsy planned to run away with her boyfriend to avoid Claudine finding her. However, at that moment she found out that he could not leave his home because he was on parole. A few hours later, Claudine arrived at the place and immediately took her back home. The woman had discovered the conversations that Gypsy and her boyfriend had on Facebook and was able to quickly find his whereabouts. In revenge, she smashed her laptop with a hammer and warned her that she would break her hands if she spoke to another person on social media again. Not satisfied with that, she handcuffed her to the bed for 2 weeks and later tied her with a dog leash. From then on, Claudine's punishments became increasingly cruel, going as far as hitting her with a clothes hanger or depriving her of food. In 2012, a charity donated a new computer to Gypsy, and despite threats from her mother, she created several Facebook profiles to keep in touch with other men, including accessing a Christian dating site where she eventually met Nicholas Godejohn, 26. Nicholas was a young man diagnosed with autism, who spent much of his time alone. Although he lived with his mother, he had no friends, and his virtual relationship with Gypsy absorbed him completely. And although he seemed to be a calm person, as the months passed his behavior became increasingly strange. He claimed to have multiple personalities. He also began to show a great interest in sadomasochism, and Gypsy did not hesitate to please him. The young woman sent him erotic photographs, assuming different personalities, which she named Ruby and Candy, as well as dressing up as Harley Quinn while she licked a knife. Although it was simple sexual games, apparently all this awakened in Nicholas certain sadistic fantasies. After 2 years of a virtual relationship, both young people decided to meet in person. Gypsy fell in love, and had even told her neighbor Alea Woodmansey that she had met a boy on a dating site, and that she wanted to marry him. In March 2015, they planned to meet at the premiere of the film Cinderella. According to Gypsy, during the screening they had agreed to meet in a disabled bathroom and have sex, but the young man could not get an erection. They later exchanged words in front of the girl's mother, pretending to be a casual encounter, and although Nicholas tried to make a good impression, the woman immediately distrusted him. In the days following the meeting, Gypsy was desperate to meet her boyfriend again, but she knew that Claudine would prevent it. The conversations between them escalated to such a degree that finally Gypsy asked him to kill her mother so they could run away and make a life together. Nicholas told her that he was not capable of committing murder, but one of his personalities, Victor, a 500-year-old bloodthirsty vampire, could do it. These disturbing conversations were recorded on their Facebook profiles and were presented as evidence during the investigation. On the morning of June 10th, Nicholas approached the property where Claudine and Gypsy lived. The girl had bought him a bus ticket from Wisconsin to Springfield. That night she left the door unlocked, and days before she had stolen a knife from a Walmart while he was shopping with his mother. She left it hidden near the entrance so that his boyfriend would find it right after entering the house. When Nicholas entered through the front door, he took the gun and silently went to Gypsy's room. He told her that he was Victor, and that he was willing to kill Claudine, but after doing so, he was going to sexually abuse her corpse. The girl asked him not to do it and promised that they would have sex after the crime. Nicholas agreed, but ordered her to shave her entire body and wait for him completely naked inside the bathroom. Gypsy followed her boyfriend's instructions to the letter and locked herself in the bathroom. The young man entered Claudine's room and stabbed her 17 times. After committing the crime, the two had sexual relations, and a few hours later they fled, with $4,400 that Claudine kept from her savings. Aware that they could be arrested or questioned by police while still in town, they decided to mail the murder weapon to Nicholas's home to eventually dispose of it, then spent a night in a nearby hotel, and the next day bought a pair of bus tickets to head to Big Bend, Wisconsin, where they would be arrested on June 15th. Once the gruesome details came to light, a heated debate arose in the United States. While everything pointed to Gypsy having convinced Nicholas to kill Claudine in cold blood, The truth was that Gypsy had been the victim of cruel and aberrant treatment by her mother. In fact, this case would be classified as one of the most severe Munchausen by proxy cases ever documented internationally. The systematic physical and psychological abuse to which she was subjected for 24 years was certainly considered an extenuating circumstance during the trial. Between 2005 and 2014, Gypsy was admitted to various hospitals more than 100 times to undergo all kinds of invasive and unnecessary procedures. It was also proven that Gypsy had developed a dependency on several of the medications that her own mother gave her, and at times she lost track of reality. After being arrested, Gypsy told officers that she posted the Facebook messages on June 14th to have them discovered because she was sorry for what she had done. And as the days went by, she began to feel uncomfortable with Nicholas. She thought the young man lived alone in Wisconsin, but in reality, he shared the home with his mother. At the same time, he proved to be extremely controlling and had sudden mood swings, which ended up exhausting her. On the other hand, while Nicholas had no criminal record, he was clearly a disturbed person, living his day-to-day life as isolated as Gypsy herself, and claiming to have an evil personality named Victor, whom he held responsible for Clauden's murder. Gypsy would plead guilty to second-degree murder, and her trial was held on June 5, 2016, with much of the public agreeing that the young woman was, above all, a victim of her mother's abominable acts, and that she deserved some consideration. Clauden's true identity became evident, sparking widespread condemnation, and not even her own family wanted to receive her ashes. Gypsy was eventually sentenced to 10 years in prison at the Chillicothe Correctional Center in Missouri, with the possibility of parole after serving 85% of her sentence. Nicholas would be charged with first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole on November 13, 2018. Shortly before receiving his sentence, the young man told the judge that his love for Gypsy had completely blinded him. He was lost. "I have always been a missing link, and that is the reason I immersed myself in this situation, where I fell so deeply in love." Nicholas attempted to maintain contact with Gypsy after their imprisonment, sending her a letter, but the young woman threw it away, Gypsy said in an interview with ABC News. "Nicholas was a lot like my mother. In some ways they were both very controlling. I was trained my whole life to do what I was told, and I feel like he wanted that for whoever was his girlfriend." Nicholas, who is currently incarcerated in the Potosi Correctional Center, would state in another recent interview, "I loved Gypsy to the point that I would do anything for her. I proved that with what I did, unfortunately, because of how far I went. I feel like she has betrayed me. I feel like she has abandoned me." During her time behind bars, Gypsy was interviewed numerous times by the media, who wanted to know her story firsthand. The young woman confessed that although she felt sorry for what she had done, she was happy and optimistic about her future. Paradoxically, she said that the first time she felt truly free was in prison, because she interacted with other people and even formed a circle of friends. She also managed to rebuild her relationship with her father and stepmother and form a bond with her half-sister. The story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard had a huge international impact, and several documentaries were made about the case. As a result of the widespread media coverage, the young woman not only achieved fame, but also began to receive thousands of letters from Americans expressing their support and admiration, in addition to letters from hundreds of other men romantically interested in her. On July 21, 2022, Gypsy married Ryan Anderson, a man she met through a pen pal system for prisoners, and on December 28, 2023, after serving 85% of her sentence, she would be released at the age of 32. Upon leaving prison, she gave a couple of interviews and opened a TikTok account that quickly surpassed 9 million followers. Her popularity on social media has sparked several controversies, but the vast majority of people send her constant messages of support. To date, several books have been published about the case, as well as documentaries and series such as The Act, released in 2019. In January 2024, Prison Confessions, Gypsy Rose Blanchard, a documentary series, was also released, in which the young woman narrates in detail her shocking story, her unhealthy relationship with her mother, and the tragic outcome. It is very likely that Clauden Blanchard was a psychopath and narcissist, had an enormous power of manipulation, was a liar, cynical, and cruel, From a very young age, she demonstrated parasitic behavior towards her family and did not hesitate to go to such nefarious extremes as degrading the health of her own daughter to turn her into a source of income and the focus of attention of an entire country. In addition, she took advantage of the good faith of the community and various charitable organizations to obtain money and all kinds of royalties. But perhaps the most outrageous thing was how she managed to deceive the system for more than 2 decades, subjecting Gypsy to all kinds of surgical interventions and invasive treatments with the approval of health professionals. This is without a doubt one of the most controversial points, and one that continues to generate discussions to this day.